What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode here on the Lure Lab, episode number 104. And as always, a part of the Serious Angler Network. And I am your host, the Captain, Andrew Full. And today we have an awesome episode for you. We're gonna dive into the evolution of fluke fishing with Mikey Balls. But first, before we bring Mikey on here, I have to let you know. Click on the description, go down below. Everything that we talk about here, if it is listed on Omnia, will be linked down below, and you can type in Series 10 at checkout and save yourself 10%. And I'm sure we're going to be going through a ton of stuff here to help those who are tuning in to catch more bass. So without further ado, let's get Mikey on here and chat a little fluke fishing. What's up, man?
Bro, I'm digging in my little box.
The fluke box.
The fluke box. It's not a fluke. Are we gonna have a running pun? We should probably do that, dude.
Good.
Yeah, I'm pulling out all the sneaky stuff, dude. So I hope Omnia stocks them all because
you never know. We'll find out. They might have some, they might not. It's all good. You know, Omnia is growing. So as we talk about baits and stuff, they kind of bring them in. But I mean, their selection seems to get bigger every month. So it's pretty sweet to see.
They're super cool dudes too. I talked to my favorite part that they're out of like Minnesota. Don't tell them. Well, they're gonna see the podcast, but like, hey bud, how you doing? You know, I'm like, hey bud, you know, I talk like I know that talk. I can talk with you. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, you want to split some New Glarus and just have a time, right? Like,
yeah, exactly, dude.
Oh man, yeah, good stuff, right? Like, it's funny once you get to like that Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, like UP, like Oopers, right? Like New York, like we all kind of have like that blended Canadian accent in the talk. You know, it's really bad about it too is like Burlington, Vermont area.
Really?
Same thing. Yeah, they get like that Canadian twang. Hey, bud.
Hey, bud. Yeah. How's Cheryl down at the Moose Lodge? You know, she been good? Yeah, serving cocktails still, huh?
Oh, yeah. Everything's a question. Everything is a question.
I mean, it's like that hipster thing where like the tone goes up at the end of the sentence all the time. I don't know. Like,
I think one of my favorites, like I'm not making fun of Canadians here, but my buddy works at like a fly fishing shop and they'll come in from Canada, come in and be like, oh, this sweater's on sale there, eh? Like, what?
That's confirmed, buddy. Confirmed.
Yeah, confirmed. Yes. The sign says sale. It's like, oh my God.
It's good.
But anyways, you know, like as I introduced you here, there's this vast evolution of fluke fishing in today's modern bass fishing, right? Yeah. But like, I guess we're going to start at the origin. Like, what is a fluke style bait? And I mean, we're not going to dive into how to fish it yet, but like, what is like some common ways that people would rig it and fish a fluke at the moment? Maybe from the beginning.
You know, for me, so I'm going to throw something in. I caught my first 30-pound bag on a fluke, actually. So, like, I kind of
your standard Texas rigging, old
style. It was a Texas rig, offset chain hook. Now, in my context, I was using a little wider gap because we were around grass, so it was a wide gap, an EWG. But normally, you know, your standard O'Shaughnessy, Texas rig hook. I know a lot of guys when they're doing that open water fishing are going to run that straight shank and actually thread the fluke on and that. But in my opinion, it's basically one of two things. It's like a soft plastic like spook, I guess, which rhymes with fluke. That's why it's hard to say. Or a soft plastic jerkbait. You know, something that looks like a minnow that does the S wave, dude. Yeah. That's kind of how I define it.
Yeah. Do you find like different flukes kind of dance differently underneath the water? Like you can chop some a little harder and some you need to fish slower and wider.
100%. And the plastic consistency makes a difference on how they behave. Like ironically, like a Zoom Super Fluke, you know, like the standard, it's a little bit harder plastic in some of the less or the more opaque colors, the ones that you can't see through as well. The plastic's actually harder. In the clearer ones, it's a little bit softer, but I find that the harder ones actually do the back and forth, that walk the dog better. Now, they might not be as like super supple and stuff. And actually the softer ones have a little, it's a much more darty action, but it's less elongated, if you will. Like it dies quicker. So like the energy that you put in is sort of muted more quicker, if that
Like
makes
the
sense.
water basically steals the inertia of the bait and just.
And I think the suppleness of the bait does too, because it'll jerk, but then it's like I just jerked and then it like shakes and then it sort of dies. Whereas the hard ones, it's almost like they contain that energy and they'll do more of that S-wall. Like a perfect example is like a fluke's a commodity item, right? Like the majority of them, except some of the ones I'm going to show you here, look the same. So Gambler makes a fluke, right? It's called a super stud. It's your standard fluke mold. Then you have like the super fluke from Zoom, you know, the super fluke is harder. The Gambler one is softer, and the Gambler one actually like has a different twitch to it. So like I'll actually use the exact same color in both in different applications, depending on what kind of like action I'm looking for.
It's very interesting. Do you ever mess around with like the caffeine shad? Because it doesn't have that fork tail. It's more of like a bulbous tail.
I have. I'm not a huge fan, to be honest. It looks really cool and the concept is right, but it never. If I want a fluke, it needs to be like super fluky dookie, you know. And that has a little more to me like of a deader action, and I get that out of the super soft baits too. But it is super easy to throw. That tail on there makes it really easy to freaking launch, dude.
Yeah, when I used to fish the caffeine shed, it was on a big caster, like 15-pound test. And I'd throw it for stage smallmouth. So like that last break right before they move onto a spawning flat, if I had grass and nothing else, I would throw that fluke in that grass and they would come unglued on it. And the only one they would eat was the caffeine shad and smoky shad.
Interesting.
But they had to have bait fish near that grass. It was the only time they would bite it. It was kind of crazy. Yeah. And they would only like you could snap it right like 2-3 times, and they would only eat it on the fall because it kind of slightly rotates on the fall.
That's interesting. Now that's kind of cool.
So you give it like you would hit it like 2-3 times hard, and then you'd hit the trigger on the bait caster and kind of let it fall on a slack line. And you'd feel them just kind of pull on it. You're like, oh, yep. Click it and engage it and jam them.
Yeah.
They're never coming off.
I always love that line jump, dude. Like, because when you rarely feel them eat a fluke, but like you'll see that line, either it goes straight or it'll just like hop. And you're like, I think I got one. But then you got to reel down 37 feet to like lock them up and actually hit them because you're fishing it weightless most of the time.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're swimming. They always grab it and swim at you.
Yeah. Dude. You're like, is he there? Is he? It's the worst worm bite ever, basically, dude.
But it's fun. Everyone loves it. So, what is your favorite fluke fishing story of like all time?
Oh, the best one, 100% that first 30-pound bag. So I'm down there in my tin boat, Tracker 175 on the vast ocean inland.
The OG,
OG
Tracker.
It's actually, dude, it's on my YouTube channel somewhere, bro. Like, but we were chasing. I think it was like May or April. So there's a shad spawn happening, and then there's a brim spawn happening. That's when we get like the first run of that. And the water was low back in the day, you know, so the grass lines extend way out. And gin clear, like tannic clear, but gin clear. And I figured out this pattern where you'd go on the outside of the round reeds. I think they do something like it actually in Minnesota, where they have those like round reed clumps and the cane clumps.
Reeds, yeah,
but it's in like 5-6 feet of water, and it's like you can see everything, right? So the brim will bed on that, and we had there's a place called Observation Shoal. We call it Shoal, and it was this long line, miles and miles and miles of those round reeds with that hard line, and there's probably 2 to 3 foot of water on the edge of them. So I would get in my tracker and I'd run on like a slow pad, 15-20 miles an hour. And you could literally see small wolf packs of fish running along that grass line, and you'd come off pad and stop. And then the other thing you'd target is whenever you'd have that straight grass line, you'd have a couple clumps that would stick out and there'd be isolated. And that's where the brim would bed too. So I stopped on one of those clumps, and I thought I had saw a shadow of a fish cruising, and I picked up a Zoom Super Fluke, 7-foot medium heavy rod, spinning rod, 15-pound leader, 15-pound braid, I think it was, just classic setup. And basically you throw to that grass line and just twitch. And I drew them out, dude. And it was ridiculous. I caught like a 7, an 8, 6, a 5, all on that. And I would literally hook them, and I'd back. This is before I had power poles or anything. We're talking like 2013, bro. And I'd hook them, and I'd back away because I'd see all these fish coming out with them, and I didn't want to get them all like spooked in that. So I'd hook the fish, try to get away, and then you're fighting. Thank God it was semi-open water, fighting the fish, you land it, and then you push back in and make that exact same cast. The funniest part about it, though, about in like usually it's more June-ish, but it must have been a warm year. The gators lay on the bottom because the water starts getting hot and they start getting lethargic. So one of the 6-pounders I caught, I hook it and like it's pulling me towards the grass. And I'm like, oh shit, like I gotta back off. So I'm like turning, and I look down on the bottom. And to you guys, you'd be like, oh, there's a log on the bottom. There aren't any logs in freaking Okeechobee, dude. There's like an 8-foot gator laying on the bottom. And usually I wouldn't care. But if you got a fish that's like distraught and jumping in that, then they get all interested because they think there's something to eat. So the whole time I'm trying to keep the boat like over and then pull it away from like where the gator is. And so I can land the fish without freaking reaching my hand down there. He never actually got all excited, thank God.
He was sleeping.
I smoked him, dude. It was so cool, and I watched every single one eat it. You could see like the shadow of the fish coming out from the grass,
scoot out, and all of a sudden just disappear.
Dude, it was so cool. And they just drags buzzing. It was so that that's my best fluke story, dude. I had so much fun that day, and I've never been on like a fluke. Like you catch 1, 6, 7 pounds here and there, schooling and stuff, but I've never had them where they were just lined up chowing on it.
Man, magical, right? Like that reminds me of like spinnerbait bites, when you're fishing like that big spinnerbait, like a foot underneath the water, and you can see it flash.
Disappears, dude.
I'm like, where'd it go? Oh, yeah.
Yep. That's exactly it, dude.
Some of the best bites ever. Like my favorite is like with smallmouth. Like I use a fluke on the back of a spinnerbait a ton just to kind of like keel it out, right? Because a lot of times a boot tail, I feel like, will drag it too much and kind of make it go left and right. That I found a fluke by putting on a spinnerbait will actually allow it to run tried and straight, like tried and true. And I'm just like burning it for smallmouth, and I'll never forget one hit it so hard that it literally went like 8 feet to the left when the 6-pounder smoked it. And I'm just like,
that's awesome.
Like I'm reeling. I'm like, oh God, here he goes. It hurts because you have to hit him so hard because it's 15 to 17 pound test. Oh, so much fun. But
that's a good point though that I think we should mention. Like, so I keep way too much tackle. Like I got my bin here. I got a giant thing of like Bass Mafia. Like I bring way too much stuff with me. If I had to get rid of everything, so I just have like trailers for my chatterbaits and have something that was a multi-factored like bait, it'd be a fluke, dude. It's seriously, in my opinion, the most basic, best chatterbait trailer to ever chatterbait trailer. Like it takes all the action from the chatterbait. It doesn't inhibit it. It doesn't do anything stupid to the way it makes it hunt. It darts around. It shakes its booty. Like it's I think that's what's cool with some of those old school like base baits, you call them, like a ribbon tail or like, they have their main function, but they're super multifaceted and you can do a bunch of different things with them. And in my opinion, it's still one of the best chatterbait trailers ever.
Yeah, it's the only chatterbait trailer I use.
Really?
It's spinnerbait trailer, yeah.
Interesting. So you're not all into the Yamamoto one and all?
I have them. I catch more fish with a fluke.
I think so too, to be honest with you. Maybe a spunk shad, which is sort of like a modification of the spook. I like that on the back of a chatterbait, but it's the same concept, like it's that little dangle tail.
Like I learned a thing, and I should post about this. Like it's giving up secrets though, right? Like my flukes, I literally
there are any left, dude.
So you have the belly and a super spook. I was trying to see if I have one here that I've actually cut. But I modify them to make that tail actually shake even more. But I think I put it in my boat when I went largemouth fishing. Well, what I'll do, I used to walleye fish a ton with like a ball head and a fluke.
Yeah.
And what I would do is take like your fly tying scissors and from just about where that belly kind of rounds up, I'd put like little 1/8-inch notches in it and space them out by like a 1/4 inch on both sides. And that allows that tail of the fluke to act kind of like a Zega.
Really?
Yeah.
Kind of like a ribbing almost, or like a honey thingy, so that more water seeps or pushes through. That's really cool.
And I learned that jig head fishing with the fluke because when you straight reel the fluke, when you put the ribs in it, the tail would actually go side to side on a straight retreat. Yeah. It's also pretty deadly on a jig head minnow.
Yes. We're going to talk about that, even though you don't want to.
Oh, it's fine. When you're shaking it, it'll actually cause that fluke to roll more, and the tail will actually kick left and right instead of being straight.
Yeah.
So now I got you. Now I just gave you another mod.
Oh no, I love that because I think even the cavity in those
Yeah.
flukes, it catches the water and actually causes it to roll when you're doing that little Japanese kind of pop kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So yeah, just little square notches down the side of it on both sides, and don't like stagger them. They're uneven on both sides, right? So like if you have a raise on one side, that's where you want the notch on the other.
So you know what's kind of interesting? NetBait is coming out with, I think it's called,
The Hex series, right?
yeah, dude, and it's honeycombed. So it's
Yeah.
like the same basic concept, not exactly, but that thing, dude. I've seen the prototypes
Yeah.
of it.
It has way more action. Yep.
Bro, yeah.
So man, I just that's some juice right there, especially on a chatterbait. Because if you ever look at
Yep.
like a zoom fluke on a chatterbait, it doesn't look like much, but it's moving. As soon as you
Mhm.
put those notches in it, that whole tail will kick just with the
That's
same rhythm of the
funny.
chatterbait. Yeah. The issue is if one bites the tail, you lose, then you have to
Yeah, it's gone.
modify another one. But yeah.
Well, even when you, that's actually the downside when you do use it for the chat, there's no meat on that nose. Like half the time you're hooking through that hollow, like you hook through the nose and then the hook's through half the hollow body to like get it. It's kind of junk, but it works so well and they're kind of cheap. So
Yeah, who cares?
yeah,
It
right.
works. It
Just send it.
works. It works. So there's what 10,000 different flukes on the market, right? Or fluke style baits. I'm gonna give you a really hard task. I want you to break down your top 5 favorite ones and why.
So I guess I gotta go with like recently. I actually really like the Gambler Super Stud, and it's literally the exact same style mold as the Zoom Fluke. But like I said, it has that softer body, and with all the forward facing stuff we're doing, I like the softer body on the chatterbait. So it's a better chatterbait trailer to me than the Super Fluke, and it also I love throwing a fluke on a hover hook. And
Mm.
it's absolutely before
That's the
talking
nail
like,
weight in the nose, right? And the
no, dude, on the straight hover hook, like the Gambler one or the
oh
core
yeah.
tackle one.
Yeah.
2 years ago, I couldn't put the video up because it wasn't out yet. That's how I smoked him on Gunnersville. The year Jacob Wheeler did his mid strolling stuff, dude, I was smoking like 24 pounds a day on a hover hook with a fluke, and it was ridiculous. And I kept trying all the funny part is I kept trying all these fancy minnow baits, right? Like I bought all this Japanese stuff, and the reality is the fluke did a far better job than all of those because you get the twitch. It was bulky enough to throw. Some of those minnow baits get a little light when you're only using a 16th ounce or a 332nd, you know.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the deal. But that was the Super Studs, one of them. I can't really rank them in order because they all sort of have their own little dimension.
Niche, yeah.
Right now, if I'm being 100% honest, like the Sakamata, like you gotta have it. Like it's its own class of fluke with the wings.
Especially what the 5 to 8 inch one.
5 to 8 inches is the deal, dude. That's going to change though as we get to winter. I think it got super popular when the bigger sizes were more juicy, but we start hitting like December, January, and you see water temps in the 40s to 50s. It's going to be the little 3-inch dangle, dude. Like it's going to be the small one.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one. One that guys don't talk about that I've been playing around with a lot is this guy. This is the Duo Realis, the pintail. So the difference, it looks the same from the side profile, but if you actually look at it from an up in the sky profile, it's a much thinner bait, and it has on a jig head, it has this real rocking action. And the tail is really, it's a pin tail. It's a very straight tail, not forked. And bro, when you burn that thing, I'm not even talking about putting English on it, I'm talking about like burning it. It does that whole cilia. Yeah, like that. And it's freaking naughty, dude.
So
That's one that,
acts almost like a thread fin, probably,
yeah,
right?
100%. And
Real
on a hover
darty and
hook, dude,
fast.
when you do that little reaction thing, like the fast reels, it goes absolutely crazy. That's
Fantastic.
one. Let's stick with like the underrated ones. So everybody loves a freaking Fat Impact, right? No one talks about these guys.
Great drop shot bait too. The Shad Impact.
Small one, great. Dude, this is the 5-inch, the 4-inch, the 3-inch is great on the drop shot. It's a little tough on a hover hook in that, but when I'm actually pitching the fish, I'll use that 3-inch. But dude, the 4-inch and the 5-inch are absolutely naughty. Jig head minnow, or if you're really getting crazy and you want to twitch like a fluke super soft, the only problem is they're just as destructible as every other Kitech plastic that's out there, and they last solamente uno fish, dude. Like it's one and done. But they're killer. Winter cold water conditions, that's when it plays, dude, because that thing is still moving like a robo worm, like, you know, all those real
It's got
custom
that subtle, not
yeah,
super hard darty action because there's so much salt in it, right?
exactly. And the plastic is so supple. It doesn't suffer when the water temps are in the 50s and the 40s, where that plastic starts getting real hard and not moving. Those jokers move.
And that's why the Kitech is the best cold water swim bait
100%.
probably ever made.
Like they can't knock it off. They can knock it off for looks. They can't knock it off for composition and like construction. That's the whole. And the shad, what are they called? The shad impacts are the same, dude. It's not a fluke I would throw in 85-degree water for schoolies, because literally you'll miss your opportunity at 20 fish to catch one. But like cold water conditions or fish that are super just quirky and you need something subtle, that's pretty naughty. The other one that I've played with a bit is I'm actually going to do 2, which will put me at 6, I think. But screw
That's
you,
fine.
I'm making my own rules for this.
Yeah, I don't care. You do what you gotta do.
The cast ended. I have to thank you, because you're the one who introduced me to Ryan and put me on this, dude.
I ruined you. I'm sorry.
This guy, and this is the small version, but then there's a bigger version that we use, and we have a real cool rig for the bigger version as well as this. Different body shape. It has that little rattle in the chest. The 2 rigs that are naughty with that, I actually don't use it that much on like a minnow jig or like jerking. I actually take it and take where are those jokers?
Are you going queen tackle head?
I am going to go queen tackle head. So queen tackle head, the new offset one that's all crazy, you can put that on there and reel it, and it acts like a trap. Or the other way is putting, you know, the Milliken way or whatever, where you put that ball head in the nose and then you use that 90 hook, but you do get a lot of slippage out of that 90 hook. And then the other one that's kind of naughty is for spots on Smith. I actually took, this is the 3-inch one. So it has, let me pull this out real fast. You know this, Andrew, but I'm just going to put it. So it has that little rattle that pulls out, and then you end up with an empty cavity when you pull it out. Be careful pulling it out with your teeth. I broke them in my mouth and eaten like glass before. Not so bueno. But what I've done is I'll take that out, and we do this with the Prodigy already, but no one has talked about it very much with the Echo, is we take a little circle hook, put a 16th, sometimes a 3/32, but it's a little big for those small baits. And I actually fish it like a fluke, like an open water fluke. You have to use like a medium light to a light action.
You might as well be BFS fishing at that
point. That's a perfect example, dude. Yeah. But for when they're on that little bait and you can't move it super fast because it gets all squirrely and jumps out of the water. But for those sort of late season, probably like November schoolies that we see where they're next to a dock or something, they won't eat anything, dude. And you need something tiny that you can twitch that just gets slightly below the water. It's kind of cool. You can also reel it really slow. And if you're really willing to kill yourself after a day of fishing, you can sink it down to like 15 to 20 foot. And I'm talking like a 5-to-1 reel, dude, doing that. And the tail ever so slightly shakes, just like the Prodigy, but without the boot, you know?
Juice.
Then the other one was, what was it? Oh, these guys. So this one's kind of unique. It's the Fish Arrow. The flat
right there.
So it's another example of one of the big ones. They make them in the bigger sizes. They're the price is hefty. But what's really interesting about these, and I didn't know it till I actually caught some fish on it and screwed it up, is they have freaking foil inside them, dude. There's foil. You can kind of see it a little. There's a little bit of a reflection. My cam ain't that great.
Right down the center line,
Right down the center line, and it's about yay big. And I couldn't figure out what. So I'm throwing a 7-inch Sakamoto, right? And I'm like, dude, I can see you pretty decent. Bop, bop, bop. And I got some fish arrows to try something different. And I throw it out, and dude, it's like, oh, you see this giant light, 100 feet out on your forward facing. And I'm like, what just happened, dude? Like, is that my bait? And then I go like that, and it goes, oh. I'm like, wow. So I caught like a 5-pounder on it. It was all ripped up, just like the Sakamotos. They tear up pretty easy. But I get it back, and I'm like, what's this little present? It's like Willy Wonka and like the foil on the inside, bro. There's literally
the golden ticket.
Yeah, there's foil on the inside, and that's what's doing it. It's like when you get that rock, that signal freaking hits it, and it's that density or the metal. I don't know what it is, but the report is insane, bro.
That's wild. Huh.
I tried to mod some flukes to do it. I struggled. I took a super fluke, like a 7-inch Magnum, and I tried using Mend It to actually mend foil.
Like an X-Acto knife and kind of open it up.
I tried to do it. It kind of worked, but there was a lot of slippage. It wasn't a consistent product. Like you could do it on the water if you ran out, you know, and you needed to do something. But the question is, would you be better off mending like the fish arrow and trying to fix the junker that you had versus trying to do something different? I don't know. But there is something to that. I think you might see some especially the JDM stuff start to play around with some of that foil, or that I know they do it with plastic mixes where they're embedding some metal, you know, particles and stuff. But that, bro, I'm telling you, it's like a bright light in the distance when you put that thing on forward facing.
That's wild. What? Can you do that again?
That'd be a great ad, right?
Show me the light.
But it makes a big difference. I mean, what are you running forward facing wise?
Oh, I use Mega Live, probably in third place, but I've got it pretty dialed. I can see my bait kind of flicker at like 80 feet.
But that's the great point though, because we're starting to look out to 80, 100 with my active target too. I'm at $120, bro. Yeah. And like when you start talking about that distance, like I don't care what
really hard to see.
It's hard to see. So any kind of thing you can increase visibility and contact with is a big difference, because the more and more we play with these jokers, like we're gonna have to be bombing like surf casting casts out there to like make them bite, because they're gonna be like, yeah, we're not having it today, you know. So you're gonna have to stay off them and be finesse.
Well, we're on that term. Alpha Angler, you know, the rod company out in the Pacific Northwest. Boomer actually designed, him and I think Brandon did, a different style of alloy for jig head minnow for a greater return on forward facing sonar.
Really?
It's not lead and it's not tungsten. So like a 3/16 is actually the size of like a quarter, and it gets bigger. And then like, I think the quarter is like the size of a 3/8 head. They're expensive, but yeah,
I don't know if I have. Yeah, I do have one. So we did something. Gambler did something, and it's still lead. So it's more of this is more of engineering versus construction. But we did these guys, and they're ridged jig heads, because what we ended up finding out is the more angle and the more planes of sort of what would you call it? The more planes, more intersective planes that you can get on a jig, the better you can see it, because no matter what angle the jig is at, the signal is going to bounce off like a plane.
It's going to grab it better.
It's going to grab it. And
that's why you see a glide bait so well, right? Because as it moves, it flashes.
But we found out with the jig heads, and then it was interesting because there's my buddy sponsors him. He's on the Elite Series now, but 44 Tackle has, I forget what his name is, a heftier guy from Maine, but just an absolute stick. He does that football jig trick, right? Where
they're dropping Tyler Williams.
Tyler Williams, exactly. His jig of choice, correct me if I'm wrong, is it a greenfish tackle football head?
Stuff. Yeah.
So that football head actually has those ridges too. So I was talking to Chris at 44, and he's like, yeah, this is the jig he uses, all this. And I'm like, really? So I look it up, and there it is. Like there's ridges. So there's something to that, like with the locating, seeing it, like having those angles on that head. Now, at one point, they're going to impact action and how it works and fishes, but that's another way to get a better return out of the bait that you're fishing.
So, that's very interesting. Now I'm going to have to go mess around with all my tackle and see which ones show up.
Take a hammer and start pounding jigs.
Like hit on the concrete a little bit to get
I've done that, dude. I'm not going to lie. I took a chisel and I started wedging stuff. I'm like, damn, that looks pretty darn cool. Like,
yeah, it's different, right? So, but I kind of want to start back at the origin of fluke fishing, right? And all the way today through the evolution. I want to know like some of the different mods and best ways that you found through the years to rig a fluke and fish it.
I think I burned through some of them already. Like the belly. So on that cast, like the belly nail weight, that's definitely naughty. The Texas rig, doing some split shotting, but like super light though. Like you use like the not crappy, but like the worm
water gremlins.
Yeah, like the old school, like, and you put it 12 inches ahead, 6 inches ahead. The other one that's fun, and I think it's sort of somewhat of a lost art. I actually played with it last year or 2 years ago in
You're
Gunnersville.
going double fluke rig?
No, that one's a headache. That's like tying up a Carolina rig. It's like I want to tie it on, but I'm kind of lazy. Like, but the belly weighted hooks. I think a lot of guys like literally. So the fluke category, you go on Omnia, you go on Tackle Warehouse. It's soft plastic jerkbait, right? Like that's what it is. And I think we forget sometimes that you can fish this thing down to like 25, 30 foot. And like those light belly weights, I was actually trying to catch them. It didn't work out as well as I wanted. I was on an awesome chop glide bite out deep, and I started taking a Zoom Magnum fluke and putting an 1/8 ounce all the way from a 16th to a 3/16 belly weighted medium wire hook. I think VMC made it, and it's a weight back hook. And basically forward facing them like I would like a Vision 110+2, like I'd sink it down instead, or like a glide bait, and I'd fish it in that parallel water column once I got it down. That was kind of a fun deal. I know guys for spots are doing that with much smaller flukes, on Lanier, Hartwell, places like that.
Giving up some juice for the Southeast boys right there.
Yeah, that one's kind of fun, man, because like literally it's a much more manageable bait to fish than a 110. Like there's nothing you can do wrong, and you just sink it down and you dart it, and you can fish it up to the surface pretty fast too. Like if they start drawing up, you can and it kind of comes up and dances. That's one that's pretty cool. It's tough to beat the old school O'Shaughnessy though. Like if in my time, I guess, as I started fishing in that, the fluke was a schooling rig. And for us, schooling was always like a top water kind of just below the surface deal. So just a weightless O'Shaughnessy hook, is like you could fish it fast. You could sink it down a couple inches because of the weight of the hook. And now I guess we're doing the same thing. We're just doing it deeper to these schooling fish, So, and then ball head. It's not super, classical, but putting it on the ball head and doing that kind of a retrieve. The other thing that I've actually done is spoon fished a fluke on the bottom. So we would take like a 5 to 7 inch bait and put like a 1/2 ounce swim bait head on it, like your standard swim bait jig head. Screw lock is the best, and you'd actually use it like you would to what do they call that when you were stroking a jig? Yeah. So you'd stroke a fluke instead of a jig. And like you were talking about that spinning kind of deal, you get that spinning fall, and it's just this darting spoon-like jump up, and then it just spins on down. And that's kind of naughty. That's a little sneaky thing for ledge fishing.
Love that. So through all of the weighted soft plastic jerk baits, right? Like, do you have multiple setups, or do you have one key setup that you use for all of it?
Well, it's a tough question, I guess, because we're talking about different weights. I guess an example would be like right now I'm rigged up to go to Gunnersville. I have like a Zoom winged fluke on a 3/8 head, right? Then that's for dangle dicking. If I see some schoolies in my rod locker, I also have a fluke on an O'Shaughnessy hook, weightless. Because I can either throw like a little jerk bait to them, like a hard jerk bait, or I can throw that fluke to them depending on how they're behaving. So I guess I do have different setups. Most applications with a fluke though, and I'm talking like old school fluke fishing, even into the new school stuff, I'm throwing it on a spinning rod. I just find it's easier to cast. It's more manageable. I don't over action it. One of the worst things you can do is pull on a fluke too hard. And I think if you're going to that medium heavy bait caster, you're doing too much. Even when I'm throwing it on a bait caster, it's on a more either parabolic medium heavy, or it's on a medium action,
like a 7-foot medium.
Yeah. And I'll run it on 15-pound fluorocarbon, something a little heavier for some of those big fish. But like we talked about initially, that bite is at least 90% of the time for me, it's not a tick. When I'm doing it's you pop it, and it feels locked up or dead or hung in the grass or something. And you're like, yeah, bro, you just friggin' ate it. And you're reeling down and setting the hook. And if you have too stiff of a rod, you're gonna kind of alert that fish, and he's gonna drop it. So whether I'm forward facing fishing with a fluke, or if I'm doing your standard schooling stuff, I'm really throwing it on a spinning tackle like probably 90% of the time.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I've found like as I've progressed, right, I actually prefer throwing a fluke on a spinning rod over a bait caster because
Yeah.
of that reason. Like if you got bit, a lot of times if it wasn't a smallmouth for me, I'd rip it right out of their mouth.
Yep.
The smallmouth always had it because their mouth is so small, they would just be jammed. They let some
Yeah.
pop out as well, but a largemouth, they would just kick it open and they would drop it before it could even. So
Well, and there's always the argument too. In my opinion, there's sort of what do you call it? Like there's trade-offs, right? So a lot of our bait casters were throwing on straight fluorocarbon. Well, we go down to these lighter spinning rods. How do you get the power and leverage back from that lighter setup versus the bait casting? And that's where it's
right.
common knowledge now. But like 5 years ago, guys were throwing straight 12-pound, 10-pound, 15-pound fluorocarbon, but now we're all throwing braid to fluoro, you know? And like that, I think the braid allows us to get some of that power and that fish manageability leverage out of that spinning rod. So it's a lot easier to throw that fluke on, you know, around cover on a medium action or a medium heavy like spinning rod versus needing that bait caster with 15 or 17-pound fluorocarbon to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes complete sense. 10 years ago, if you told people to do that, they'd be like, well, you're crazy. Throw it on a bait caster at 15-pound.
We were doing that, dude.
Yeah,
we were doing that for dude. Us like the fluke in Florida was one of the standards. You got a stick bait, you got a fluke, you know, maybe a swimming worm and a frog kind of thing. But we were always throwing it on spinning tackle because you just get that bite. If you use the right spinning rod, when you're popping, and all of a sudden one locks it up, you're just popping. And you even in that 30-pound video from God knows when, like 2012, you can see me pop, and then I go pop, and on that second pop, you can see the rod tip just bend out because there's one on there. And then you just reel down and you set the hook, and it makes the hookup so much better too, dude. Like I don't know. It's just fun, dude. And then click, and there's it's fun.
Even underneath, like the big thing up here of flukes is like around docks, etc.
Yeah,
especially in the fall, and it's such a fun way to catch them. Very underrated way to catch them too.
it's super old school. Well, and everything old becomes new again. It's so funny how all these things. I don't want to get too off topic, but like the spoon. The spoon was the old man's daredevil, right? Like, and then all of a sudden we're throwing spoons on ledges and that. The same thing's happening with the fluke. All these minnow variations are flukes, different sizes, different plays, but we're just going back to the same thing and reimagining what we can do with it and how we do that with it.
Silical. Fishing is silical.
100%.
And trends.
Yes, that's
silical and trends. Yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
So before we round it out here, Mike, is there anything else you think we should hit on about the fluke for our viewers? Maybe like a tip. I feel like we've already covered all the tips to help people catch more fish, right? Like softer rod, braid to fluoro, give them a second when you know they're there. Like anything that you can think of off the top of mind.
The biggest thing I've learned with the fluke, and it's pretty much been this year, you know, like I'd always carry around like 5-inch standard super flukes, whether it was like the super stud or the zoom or whatever. The biggest thing that I've learned is how differently fish react to different sizes of the bait. And it's annoying because you have to carry a lot more with you. But like say like a fat ace versus an ace, or a 10-inch ribbon tail versus a 7-inch ribbon tail, that was never, it played a role, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I've seen that when it comes to this fluke deal, especially with forward facing, size makes a difference. And, you know, personally being a smaller man, I don't like to think that's the case, but you got to deal with reality, right, Andrew?
You're not wrong.
But I had one of the best experiences. I probably can best. Now we're getting really dirty. One of the highlight experiences that really kind of like notified me of this is like this past summer. I think we hit. I want to say it was late June, July, and I had been catching them a lot on a minnow, dangling, you know, doing some crankbait stuff, but like a lot of soft plastics, dangling, 3-inch bait, maybe a 4-inch bait, maybe a 5-inch fluke on a hover rig, and I was on those same fish and I could not get them to react, dude. Like they a week ago, you'd have 21 pounds, 23 pounds, and I'd throw that same bait and I could not get them to engage. I couldn't get them to do anything. And that's what's so cool about forward facing is you can learn. Like it's not so much throwing to the dot and catching the dot. It's why is the dot not behaving the way I want the dot to behave? What do I need to change in order to engage and activate the dot? And that's when I kind of started playing with that 7-inch Sakamata. And
the giant one.
Well, the 8-inch is the giant. The 7-inch to me is giant. But I noticed, and we had done this in Florida to match shiners, fishing shallow, more classical, twitch fluking for bedfish. We'd have these bedfish, and we'd throw a fluke, and we'd catch the buck, right? And we couldn't see him, but we knew like the fish is pissing, like it's a 12-inch, 14-inch male, like there's a bed there, there's a female there or around there, and we couldn't catch her. And then a shiner guide would come in, granted they're shiners, he'd throw freaking floats out and 7-pounder, 5-pounder. So one thing, and this was like 3 years ago, dude, I got on like a flat on stick marsh and had that problem, and I got out like a Zoom Magnum fluke and started doing the exact same thing, but on 15 or 17-pound fluorocarbon.
Hanging it by a balloon.
What's that?
Is that you're hanging it by a balloon?
Yeah.
That's what I said. Just doing the same thing,
Yeah, just sitting there waiting for like a float and fly, Florida style, dude. Yeah, that's actually a really good idea, dude. But you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
like, I got them to react with that bigger bait. And I think it mimicked more what they thought was going to eat the stuff off the beds. I had the same experience on Gunnersville. I wouldn't actually catch the numbers, but whereas I had a school that was completely neutral, I'd throw that 5-inch hover rig over and nothing would happen. I'd pick up that 7-inch Sakamata shad. And granted, I had to put some English on it and move the bait, like get it down there and maybe do my 2 fast reels and get them to engage. But I could catch the 1.5, the 1.6, the 1.4 pounder out of there and like capitalize on some bigger bites and actually get these fish to move. Whereas they literally would not raise, they would not come off the bottom, they would not do anything for a smaller bait. So the biggest thing I learned is size does matter, which is just, it's heartbreaking. And it's going to take some time to deal with, but at the same time, I'm making a penis reference. I don't know if I can say that, but yeah. You'd have to bleep me out when you put this on Instagram again, dude.
It's all good. No, I mean, I've heard worse. Like, we've seen worse. So we just marked that it's not safe for children. And see what happens.
But it does matter, dude. And I think that's one thing we've negated too, even when we're twitching, like fishing more traditionally. I think we forget, like, not all bait is 5 inches,
Right.
like. And going with something smaller or going with something larger can definitely get the fish to engage in different
Right,
ways.
you need all 4 sizes always ready to go, right?
I hate it, dude, because I used to have like a couple bags of flukes in like my chatterbait trailer box, and that's what you always use. Now I have an entire Walmart box dedicated to fluky dookies, So
you don't show up to a gunfight with a knife, right?
Yeah,
you come loaded. Better come strapped, buddy. You better come strapped.
The one nice part is there's a lot of different ones available. Like I know on Omni and there's a bunch on Tupperware. Like they all like you go on there and it used to be like 4 different SKUs, in 20 different colors, but now it's like 7, 8, 3-inch, 2-inch, 5-inch. Like there's
still like 45 other ones we didn't even talk about.
Exactly, dude. Yeah. And a lot of them have their own little unique values. The more I delve into this, they might look the same, but they all behave slightly different.
Yeah.
Dude.
And that's one of the best parts about fishing is if you have time to go out and experiment, you find and you write notes and keep logs of everything. You'll find where like, for these 2 days in high pressure and the temp was through the roof, like they would only eat this dang fluke, this one. And it's because there's a subtle difference. So never stop experimenting or messing around. That's for sure.
Well, and that's a great part about it too. Like the fluke is one of those baits where, dude, you don't need forward facing. You can do it on forward facing, but in the end, it's one of those classic baits. You could literally go to a pond, go to your lake, and bring a bag of flukes and a bag of worms, and you're going to catch fish. Yeah. Like it's so versatile. You can put it on the back of your chatterbait. That's what's kind of cool about it. That's why I don't mind this refocus on it, because in the end, there's a lot of different situations when you're throwing it other than FFS. Like it's a functional bait. So I don't mind having 27 different ones in my freaking box,
Right. And I feel like the fluke is one of those baits or a soft jerk bait that you could take everything out of your boat and just load it with that in every different size, and you can still catch a good 5-fish limit almost.
That would be a cool tournament, dude.
Yeah.
The Fluky Dookie tournament. Yeah.
Fluky Dookie, Buggy Ball, first ever Fluky Dookie tournament.
You bring it badass.
And the trophy's just a big Fluky Dookie.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I like that, dude. That's good.
Yeah, give it some wings, Oh, it's so good. Well, Mike, we're going to wrap it up here. I appreciate you coming on. We went about 20 minutes longer than I said we would, but that's anticipated. So, no, I appreciate it, man. Stay safe in Alabama. Go catch up a bunch of fish, and hopefully everyone's all right back in Florida, but it sounds like they are. So, look forward to seeing your content for when you slide back down to the Sunshine State.
Well, I appreciate it, dude. We're gonna stay tuned here. I think we're gonna have some fun, actually, specifically with a fluke in the next month or two. I hope your season stays extended. I know it's still pretty nice up there, dude. I hope.
Oh, it's gonna go every year. It goes till about Christmas. It's just, do I want to keep pulling my boat out while I'm steelhead fishing? Because jumping back and forth, it gets a little tough. But the fishing can just be absolutely unreal. Like 150, 174 pounders in a day.
And only guy on the lake stuff too, dude.
Yeah.
Nobody
like, I can tell you, like, the guys that will be out there the same day, like there's 4 of us that'll be on the lake. And we're all fishing the same 100-yard stretch because they're all just loaded in one spot.
That sounds so cool.
Everyone's doubled up. But like, how big is that one? 4.5. Oh, I got a 5. I got a 7. It's like, oh my God. It's like chaos. But they'll only bite in like little shifts, right? So you'll go an hour and jam them every cast. And then they don't bite for 2 hours. You're like, what do I do?
With the winter fish, even down here, dude, it's so window oriented. Like you can have 2 guys roll up to the same school at 2 different times a day, and homie's got 25 pounds, and you're like, man, I couldn't get a bite today. You know,
no matter how cold it is, there's always a 45-minute window bite in the morning.
Yeah,
no matter what. And then as you start getting colder, there's like no bite between, we'll call it 8 and 11.
Yeah,
and then from 11 to 2, it's like the gong show, right? Like everyone's jacking them. And then as soon as 2 o'clock hits, the bite is gone again. Because they're like, it's about to be dark in 2 hours and I'm not eating. So, winter fish they're a different animal. The water's cold. I don't like it, but the fishing can be phenomenal. So
yeah, it's worth chilling out a little bit. Go play with them.
Oh yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Mike, and we'll chat soon, all right, man?
Hey, it was fun. I'm finally glad we got it done, dude.
Well, we'll plan another one. It'll take 6 months. It's no worries. All right, we'll chat soon, buddy. I appreciate it. Bro. Well, thanks everyone for tuning into this week's episode here on the Lure Lab, episode 104. Diving into the fluky dookies, as Mikey would say here. It was a pleasure having him on here. Always full of knowledge and dropping it here. So, as I stated at the beginning of the episode, if you made it this far, reiterating it now, every bait that is on Omnia will be listed below. So make sure you hit that description, the link, head over to Omnia, type in code SERIOUS10. It'll save you 10% at checkout. And don't be afraid to check out the Premium Pro membership. You get 10% back on all of your orders. Well worth the money. Plus all kinds of other sweet little features that we dive into on the Serious Angler Network. But anyways, we appreciate everyone tuning in. If you're new here on YouTube, tongue-tied, smash that subscribe button, leave a comment down below if you still fish a fluke or you want to get back into the game. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform and it allows you to leave a review, please do so. It allows the Lure Lab and the Serious Angler Network to be seen by new people who want to get out bass fishing and learn some subtleties and some new techniques to help them put more bass in the boat, on the bank, or in the kayak. But until next week, we will see you then.